All right, what is going on, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Cameron. Today, we are finally going to be taking a look at creating to-dos with our to-do application that we've been building. We've finally gotten authentication out of the way. We've got some client-side routing going. And now that we have kind of our home screen started, we are going to actually start allowing our user to push some to-do items to our database. With that said, if you haven't already, you'll want to go ahead and read through the README, check out how to actually get the database up and running with our API. And then that being said, we're gonna move forward from there, and we are going to go ahead and take a look at, we're gonna start by taking a look at our create new to do controller function here on our API. We're taking a look at this, one, because I wanna change a couple of things, but also because I wanted to go ahead and take a look at basically the schema that this controller function, what it's expecting in the request body. So it's expecting a title, which is required, but then it also will take in a description, but that, if you'll note that this binding here for title is required, this one has a dash here just signifying that this is optional. This description is optional. We don't have to pass that. So what I wanted to change is I was gonna change just some minor, I was gonna change this to a type, and then I'm gonna actually get a, I wanted to change this to more so reflect this function. I'm going to extract this in a later video when we do a little bit of code cleanup. But then I'm gonna make this look a little bit more like our controller actions. Create new to do input, and then we are going to bind that input and access it later on. So now that we've done that, let's go ahead and I want to, now that we know kind of what this looks like, we've done a little bit of code cleanup. We will be coming back here shortly. Let's go ahead and jump over to our home page. We'll take a look. So this is kind of what that home page looks like currently. What we're gonna wanna do is, let's go ahead and get rid of this H2 and put in an input. I'm gonna give it an ID and a name. We're gonna do new to do item. Then we're going to go ahead and add a script. I really need a shorthand for this, but I don't have one currently. So we're gonna make this a TypeScript setup script, which is what basically all our scripts have been thus far, like in our login and register components. And then we are going to go ahead and create a const new to do item. I'm gonna say new to do title equals ref, which is an empty string. We'll import that from Vue. Let that format. And then we are going to say vModel equals new to do title. So basically we've just set up an input field here. We have created a new ref for this new to do title, and we are binding, we're doing some two-way data binding with our input field with our vModel, so that whenever we make a change to this input, it should just automatically update the new to do title. The next thing that we'll want to do is, let's just go ahead and add a button in and say create. And then when we do that, we'll want to go ahead and have a @click event, which we'll call an onSubmit function. You notice it's erroring for us because we have not defined an onSubmit. So we'll want to go ahead and do that on submit equals. And then here for now, we're just going to console log new to do item.value. So now you'll notice on our page here in the browser, we do have that input and we do have a button. If I click create, it's an empty string. Take out the trash. You'll notice if I input, that two-way data binding is in fact working. And if I click create, we are in fact printing that out. So this is where the next part of that comes into play. We are going to now want to submit this to the API. So just like we did with our login and register, we are going to turn this into an async function so that we can await Axios dot post. So I want to go ahead and before we get too far into that, I want to go to router. You'll notice that we have our API group. So this is going to tell us that we are going to start with our path is going to be a /API, which our host name will be here, and then it'll be /API, and then for our to-dos, it will be /todos, and then we have all of these various controller functions that are mapped to various nested URLs within this to-dos group. In our case, we are looking at because we are looking at just slash. It's going to effectively be that, which is the same as /todos. And that's what we're posting to, right? Because that's what we want to do. We want to post and create a new to-do. So this will tell us basically what our route needs to be. So let's come back to home, and like we've mentioned in the past, we'll do some refactoring at some point. But for right now, we're just going to hard code the URLs. So in our case, our API is going to be HTTP localhost 5000 /API/todos, so that we can post to our API. For our body, we're just going to pass title, and then we're going to do new to do title. And so now let's go ahead and see what happens when we try to do that. Let's go ahead and say take out the trash, create, and we get a 403. So if you were paying attention when we were looking at the router, or whenever I mentioned this in a previous video, any of our controller functions that we try to call within the to-dos group are first run through this protected middleware. The reason that we tackled login and register before all of this is because I knew that this middleware needed to be addressed before we could start adding to-dos. And what this is basically doing is it's just checking for a basic bearer auth token. So what that means is in the headers of our request, we want to send an authorization header with bearer and then some token. So let's go ahead and do that. And basically what this will do is it will take that header and then it will validate is that header correct. So let's go ahead and come back. And in order to pass that, we'll need to pass one more option to the post function here. We'll want to include in that object headers, and then we'll want authorization, like we mentioned. This will be a bearer, and then before we do anything else, let's go ahead and assign a token variable to localhost localhost local storage.get item token. And then we are going to pass a token. We're going to pass that token. So now let's try this again. Take out the trash, create, and now we're getting a 400. So if we look in the network tab, we see we posted, we got a 400. If we look at the request, we can actually look at the headers for that request, and you will see in the request headers, we pass that bearer auth token. We are indeed passing that. So why are we getting a 400? Well, before I do too much more, I want to open up a application called Beekeeper Studio. This is a database tool that I have been using before. This is the database tool that I've been using so that I can view any to-dos, basically I can view the databases that I connect to. You might be familiar with Dbeaver. It's a good option as well. I use Beekeeper Studio just because I prefer the interface, as well as some of its ease of use. It's a lot easier. It auto updates for me. I don't have to actually go download a new version like you do with Dbeaver. So there's some nice things about this, but you will definitely want one of these applications, and you will want to connect to your database. If you guys would like me to make a video on doing that, let me know, and I can go ahead and show how to get started with that. But that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and click create one more time. And then I'm going to refresh, and you'll notice whenever we did that, we did in fact, so we got a 400, right? We got a 400 response, just like we did last time, but we did in fact create a new to-do. It's just this title and this description are empty. So why is that? Let's come and take a look. In our to-dos, in our create new to do controller function, we bind our input, and so let's take a look at what might be causing this. You'll see we have headers were already written, wanted to override status code 400 with 201. So whenever I ran into this the first time, my first thought was, let me go ahead and copy this warning and post that into DuckDuckGo and see what I get back. I'll check out this issue here because this is the exact issue that I'm having currently within Gen. We know that our API is built with Gen. And whenever I looked, I was noticing that people were talking about bind. Bind is what's throwing the error, so I need to look into that. That tells me I need to look into this bind JSON. And whenever I'm looking into that, I started thinking, this doesn't look like what we were doing in our login, in our authentication controller. You'll notice we are actually trying to check for an error and give back a little bit more of a more user-friendly error, right? This will be something that we want to look into in the future in terms of error handling and what we actually display to the user. So that being said, let's try to go ahead and I'm going to paste what we got from there. This now looks pretty similar to what we had. We know in this case that this isn't going to be applicable, but we will double back in just a minute. What's important is we are printing out the error that we're going to get if there is one. And then we will just abort with the same 400 status code, and then we're returning, right? So before when we're like this, we try and we get an error, but we still continue. We're not actually breaking anywhere, and so that's why we're still creating a to-do model with an empty input, an empty description, and then this auth scope here is set. So, and then we do create. So let's go ahead and put this back the way that it was and see what the error is. Let's come back. I'm going to clear this and run create. You'll notice we still get a 400, but now if I come to the API, you'll see we did in fact, I'm going to change my preferences here so that this is easier for you to see. I'm sorry, profiles, window, turn that down. There we go. So now you can see the error that we're getting. It says cannot unmarshal object into go struct field. And so this seems a bit strange, right? But you'll remember we ran into this issue before whenever we were doing login and registration. And the issue is we're trying to pass this new to-do title. We need to pass the value of this ref, right? So what it's trying to do now is it's actually trying to send this whole ref, which is an object effectively, instead of the value, which is the string here. So now that we've done that, let's come back to the browser. Let's say take out the trash, create. You'll notice we didn't get an error. We haven't gotten any, we have not set up any sort of, we haven't set up anything that would tell us that this worked. But what we can do is we can check here. We will see, okay, that we got a 201 status code. So that should mean we did in fact get something. So now I'm going to delete this row because it's useless. But now when it refreshed, you'll notice that we do in fact have a take out the trash to do. So bam, we are actually doing something now. This is really cool. We do in fact have a title. We do have, and it's assigned to our user ID. And just for a little bit of context, in order to assign that to the user ID, you notice that we're not passing a user, we're passing this token. So what happens is we have this authentication middleware, and we effectively go and check to see, okay, is this token valid? If the token is valid, then we go ahead and we parse the JWT using our secret that's stored in our environment variables. And we go ahead and we take that user ID out of the claims that are returned from the token. And you can find all sorts of breakdowns on how all of this will actually work on YouTube. That's where I figured out how to do all of this, at least for the parsing of the JWT and setting up some basic authentication. And so I check to see if our token is valid. As long as our token is valid, I set up this auth scope, which consists of just basically our user ID. And then I set that in the context of our Go API application here, so that I can access that throughout I can access that from any of my controllers via just the standard gen context. So whenever I'm setting this, I grab this auth scope from context, and then I map that to basically what it should be. This is how I map that to the auth scope struct, which is here in my structs package. So that being said, that's how we grab the user ID. Now if we take a look, we do in fact have this to-do item. So now I think what we want to do is let's actually give ourselves some level of visibility that our to-do was created. So let's go ahead and let's create a new array. We're going to say to-do items equals ref, and it's going to be an empty array. And then we are going to add another, I'm going to add a parent div here with just a p. And then we are going to say v-4 item in to-do items. And then I'm going to print item dot title. So let's talk about what we're doing here. We set up this ref, we assign this ref so that we can access it here in our view. And then we use this v4 directive so that we can iterate over each item in to-do items. And then we are printing out item.title. So effectively what this does here, this v4 directive, if you're familiar with React or even just basic JavaScript, this would be the same as within your JSX in React saying to-do items.map item, and then I want to return a paragraph with item.title. So it's just a little bit of view magic, and I honestly think that this is a little bit. I think it's cleaner. It may not be as straightforward, just because in React this is pretty much just vanilla JavaScript with returning an HTML string almost, even though it's JSX. But once you have a firm understanding of Vue and their directives, I definitely think that this is a lot cleaner. But you'll notice that we're getting this property title does not exist on type never, and that's because item has a type of never. That is because to-dos, we never assign a value to this array. It's just an empty array. So what we need to do is we need to go ahead and type this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say interface I to-do item equals, I don't need the equals because it's an interface. And then for now, we're just going to say title and string. And then the way that we go ahead and type this is we just like any sort of generic, we will pass this I to-do item, and then this is going to be an array, so we need to tell it that it's going to be an array. Good old TypeScript. This would just work in JavaScript, but we're trying to tell it, or we're trying to be a little bit more type safe, and we get some nice syntax highlighting, right? So now if I remove this and I say item, we get title. So that being said, now what we'll want to do is let's go ahead here on our axios.post. Let's go ahead and say .then res.data, and go ahead and say const response equals await. I'm going to go ahead and catch this and say console.error. And something I want to mention here, Something I want to mention here is you'll notice we're doing this here. If we go to login, we're doing the same thing here. If we go to register, we're doing the same thing here. I think it's probably getting close to time for us to extract this. So in the next video, I think we're going to do a little bit of code cleanup and start looking at extracting like the way that we do Axios calls into a helper function, and we'll look at some other various ways of cleaning up our code and the things that we've already written. But we want to do this, and then let's just go ahead and say console.log response for now. So let's jump back to the browser. I'm going to now say walk the dog, create, and you'll notice that we got a response back with basically the entire to-do that we just created. We might want to mask, we might want to remove the user ID at some point, mask some of this data. We don't need all of this, but for the sake of what we're doing right now, you'll notice whenever we create a new to-do here in our create new to-do controller function, we just dump the to-do that we created. So that it's doing what we want it to for now. We just might want to clean that up in the future. So that works. But for now, we're not doing anything with that. What we'll want to do now is we're going to want to say to-do items dot value dot push. We could do it the immutable way and say to-do items dot equal dot concat to-do items dot value whatever. I'm just going to do it the mutable way and actually mutate to-do items. So we're going to say dot push, and then we're going to say response. So now, if we come back and we say mow the lawn, you'll notice that it doesn't work. And the reason being is we're expecting a certain output, and we don't get that output. So what we need to do is we need to just create a new object here for now. We'll set something up later. I think that you'll think it's pretty cool, but we will we'll say title, and then this needs to be response dot capital title, and that's why basically that's not working. Sometime in the future we should also look into typing these responses, but for the time being it's not that big of a deal. So now let's say wash the dishes, create, and boom, now we're actually getting these to-dos, and it's showing. So we are for sure getting something in response. It's not like we're pushing just directly pushing what is here in this input. No, we're pushing from the response. So we know that that is in fact working. The only problem is when I refresh, we don't actually get anything. We don't have anything displaying, so we lose all of our data. So something that we need to do in order to solve that is we're going to want to fetch our to-dos whenever the page loads, so that we know what to-dos have I already put in, because as of right now I lose everything. So let's go ahead, in order to do that, let's go ahead and pull in the onMounted hook from Vue. So this basically says whenever this component is mounted, I want to run a bit of code. If you're familiar with React, once again, this would be something similar to react.useEffect. So in our case, it'll just be onMounted. We'll pass a callback function to it. In our case, we're going to want this callback function to be async. And then we are going to do something very similar to what we did down here. This is further showing that this is going to need to be extracted, because we now have this in two different places. But what we're going to do is we're going to say const response equals await axios.get. And now let's look back at our router, and in order to get all to-dos, we'll want to just get our base /API /todos, right? And let's jump to this function really quick, and you'll notice we are in fact passing the user ID to the user, and in order to do that, we need the auth scope. So by looking at this, this tells us that we do in fact need to pass our authentication token, even though we already know that it's a to-do. It is a to-do controller action. So we know all of those need the authentication token, and even though we know that, if we look and see that, oh, this needs the auth scope, that also tells us, oh, yeah, I'm going to have to pass that. So let's go ahead and type in our localhost 5000 /API /todos. And then for a GET request, obviously we're not going to have anything that we're posting, so we're just going to have our config, and we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to have headers, authorization, bearer, and I'm just going to do the same thing I did before. Token equals local storage.get item token, and then we'll pass our token. Something I want to mention is in some cases on some pages you might want to do something like if not token then return, or throw up some sort of error, or handle this in some specific way. Because I am inside login, I know that I have to have that token, otherwise it would have redirected me back to the login page. And there's some caveats to that we'll discuss in a later video. But for the time being, I know that I have a token. I have to have a token, and so this is just kind of an assumption. It is a valid assumption. We know that we can count on that token being there. And so for now, let's just go ahead and log out our response. Go ahead and refresh. And we get a 401. Why did we get a 401? Bad request on the XSRF token. Let's see, what does it say? Response, bad token. So we have a bad token, just as I said that. So something I want to do really quick is let's come back to LibreWolf or your browser. I am actually going to go to storage. I am going to go to my local storage, and I'm going to delete everything and come back. And I'll explain why in just a second. So I'm going to @yt.com, sign in. It brings me back, and now we can check our console again, and boom, it works now. And you're probably thinking like, well, you didn't do anything. You didn't do anything special. Why is it working? Because the last time I worked on this was as of probably about, you'll see it's 11:51 as I'm recording this, probably at right about 11:50 I logged in last time. My token lasts 24 hours. So the 24 hours had passed, and so my token expired. So this validates that is working. Once the 24 hours passes, my token is no longer valid. It no longer works with our API. And so that's going to bring up something that we're going to look at in another video, which is checking to see if that token is still valid. And if not, we'll delete it from local storage and we'll redirect the user accordingly. But for the time being, that was a good little that was actually mentioning that caveat that I was talking about earlier, which was totally unplanned. So we see that we have our data and we are getting back our to-dos. And we're only getting back one to-do, so that's something that we're going to look at here in just a minute. Something that we need to go ahead and do, just like on the other, then res.data, and then .catch, error, console.error, error. So yeah, you can see that's getting a bit cumbersome. I already forgot to do this just now, so we're definitely going to want to extract that in the future. So now we get our array. But it's only an array of one. So why is that? If we come back to our to-dos, you'll notice our get all to-dos is only getting the very first. It's just like our get to-do by ID, except it's basically just get to-do by ID. So that being said, what we need to do is we need to change this to .find. So this should go and get everything for us. Now if you're running error on your API, I'm using error. I believe I mentioned that in a previous tutorial. I'll drop a link for error down in the description of this video, just so that you guys can go and pick that up. It's really nice. It's essentially like NodeMon or NodeDemon if you're familiar with Node. just gives you hot reloading for your API once you make code changes. If you have that already, you're good to go. Otherwise, you'll have to reload your API. But basically, the point being is once that has refreshed, once you've either started it manually or automatically, if you refresh, you'll notice, boom, we now have 4. We now have 4 of these. So what we'll want to do is, now that we have all of those, let's come back to home. Now we'll want to do to-do items.value.push. We'll push on our response. So now if we come and take a look, you'll notice I did it again. Yeah. So what we'll want to do is let's go ahead and just say to-dos equals response.map. And this is what I was talking about. We'll do something around this a little later that makes this a little less cumbersome. But this should be item. We'll return a new object with title, item.title. I'm just gonna cast this to any for now. So what we'll go ahead and do is we'll do to-do items.value equals to-dos. So I reload and I get our to-do items. So that works, right? That's pretty awesome. So what we'll go ahead and do now is we'll test to see, does this still work? We've got take out the trash, walk the dog, mow the lawn, wash the dishes, vacuum the house. Great, and it adds. It goes ahead and adds to our list, so we know that this is working. So yeah, that is the core of what we're going to be doing with this application, right? We are now doing quite a lot, right? We are not only allowing the user to create a new item, a new to-do item, but anytime they refresh the page, we are still fetching their to-do items. And we could check this by signing in with our Bob user that we set up in the authentication video, and make sure that we're not fetching the same items. We may do that in a future video just to be sure. But for now, I mean, we have given the user we've given the client application a lot of capability. In the next video, I want that video to be I want that to be more code cleanup. I want to go ahead and start moving some of this. So I want to move like the to-do items here. This is going to be shared throughout some of the application. We know that it's going to be shared through a few components. And then I want to also move some of these API calls. I want to move all of that into global state because I know that it's going to be shared. So that being said, we're going to do that. We're going to also go ahead and move these Axios requests. We're going to abstract these requests into an Axios wrapper, just kind of making this more production ready. So we're gonna move this into an Axios wrapper. We are going to extract this into an environment variable, and we are going to put all of this into some global state actions that will update our to-do items in global state. But just kind of starting to make this seem a little bit more whole. When we come back, please let me know before the next video, do you guys want to see basically building out the UI for this application, or would you prefer that I kind of build out the UI off screen and then kind of walk you through what I did? I don't know if you want to sit and watch me do CSS or what you guys would like, but yeah, no, we've done quite a lot. If you've been following up to this point, great job. This is a whole lot to take in. So let me know what I can improve on in these videos, because I want to make this easier to take in. If you guys have enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Leave comments down below. If you leave a dislike, please leave some feedback on how I can improve. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video where we get to doing some of these cleanup tasks. Have a good evening. Goodbye.